All right, so now I'll discuss measuring the pattern on the shaft. So even when you order a standard black ring shaft, a shaft that would just only have a black ring here, so like for example, the shaft here just has a black ring, it's important to know the height of this ring. I have a lot of times customers will send me photographs of their pattern, which certainly aids in my ability to get close to what you have, but there's nothing like a measurement because still in a photograph I'm still in essence guessing. So the height of this ring is important. So we're going to use the digital caliper. I'm going to close my jaws and turn it on. I'm going to close it and make sure it's at 0. So to measure this height, I can just take my caliper, I can catch the jaw on the bottom of that shaft, and I can measure. So this measures, so I get roughly 302 thousandths. Now, typically, these are in standard sizes. So when we build the cues, we typically do them at 50 thousandths, 75 thousandths, 100 thousandths, 125, 150, 300. It's very rare that it's not an even measurement. So that can aid in determining the size of that because it's very difficult to use the caliper and get it exactly measured to height. Here's another shaft that has a double white ring pattern. So it's good assistance for me when I have the measurement of the height of this ring, the height of the white ring, the height of the black ring, the white ring again, and this black ring. So on the shaft order form, there's a small box that can be used to sketch out the size of that pattern. So we can use that caliper then, this digital caliper again, to get these measurements. So this first ring here measures roughly 300 thousandths again. Then we can measure that white ring, this white ring. Now these thin rings like this are typically only a few different sizes. So if they're really thin, usually they can be thin pieces of paper, which is about 5 thousandths of an inch. This white ring is 15 thousandths of an inch. So if I measure this with the caliper, which I'll do my best, so I get about 15 thousandths of an inch. Now another very common size is 30 thousandths of an inch, which is that black ring in the middle. So if I measure this, this should measure roughly 30 thousandths across the middle. That white ring again is the same size as that first white ring. And then we can measure that top black ring, and it's 1/8 of an inch or 125 thousandths. So then it's also nice, then you can double check your measurements by taking the overall pattern height and add up all of your measurements to see how close you come to the overall measurement, to see how close you are. Now, here's an example of a more intricate joint pattern. Now, when it's a cue that we had made in our shop, it's much easier to match this. Some customers request us to try and match shafts to other cue makers' cues where they might have colored rings, different colored woods, maybe different inlays. Those are very difficult to try and replicate because over time these colors can fade and change. Also, the veneer where we currently buy it from may not be the same place that the other cue maker purchased it from. So a lot of times when these patterns get really intricate like this, it's actually better to order a shaft that has just a very simple black ring to fit on here rather than trying to match this pattern all up. Now, we do sell partial shafts where you can order an ultra shaft in a partial where you can receive the shaft with no joint pattern to it, and you can send it to the cue maker and then they can put that pattern on it. But again, to measure some of this up, you would use the same technique where you use the caliper and you can measure the heights of these different rings that come along this pattern, use that shaft order form and sketch that pattern out. Even the inlays here, for me to replicate someone else's work, it's very difficult to get it exactly like the original cue maker had done. So again, that's something you probably want to take to the original cue maker. Now, if you have, let's say, this cue and you wanted a shaft a replacement shaft made, and it had this complicated pattern to it. If you have a shaft that was made for this cue that you no longer use, you can send that shaft in, we can cut the pattern off of that shaft, and we can put it onto a new shaft. So that's also a really good option if you want to fit a very patterned shaft back to your cue. Now, sometimes you will have cues that have what's called an index pattern, where it's a series of boxed checks that go around the shaft. In this one here, it's in the center section of the cue, but in essence, it's the same as if it's up towards the joint, you would do the same thing. So some of the key measurements that we need to know measuring this pattern is we would need to know the height of this ring, also how many boxes index around the shaft. So an easy way to count that is just put a piece of masking tape on the cue and put a pencil mark on the first one, and then you can go around and you can count how many checks rotate around that ring. Also, getting the measurement of the width of the boxes is also very helpful in getting a better fit shaft to your cue. So measuring the width of the white box and also the width of the black box also makes for a much nicer fit. So those are all things to keep in mind when you look at an index pattern. Remember to count how many go around. You need the height of that ring, the width of each of the boxes, the white box and the black box. If you have any questions with ordering shafts and matching up, the best thing to do is to send the cue in to us, because when I build a shaft in the shop and I don't have the cue specifically to thread the shaft onto it, there's no guarantee that it's going to fit correctly. So it's always best if you're in question, just send the cue in and then we can fit the shaft to the butt.